The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Hello, welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And I'm Carlos.
Carlos is in the bunker today.
CJ, I don't know. Usually people ask 2 weeks to change jobs. We give CJ 1 week.
That's it. Hey, I just find it great that for once I'm out here in the middle instead of being in there on the end. So it's nice to see Carlos in the booth. But
Well, we'll say that after the show goes on with no hitches.
exactly, we'll see what hitches. We understand that there's been some audio problems with the last show. And
Can I ask if Chip has the mic? That he has a mic on?
Yes, I do have a mic.
Okay.
Mic 12, the mic I always have.
Mic 12.
Mic 12. So, can you hear me?
are we
Okay.
fine?
Are we fine? Okay.
I believe so.
All right, that's good. Well, I know we had some audio problems, and again, as you're hearing, we have a few audio problems already today, but we're hoping that we address those audio problems from the Wednesday show. But let's get right to the news of the day. I attended a meeting of the Flint Neighborhood Association, which our man in the bunker is the president of, and the fire department came out and spoke very knowledgeably on what happened with the fire at the Coughlin School, where they received a trouble alert from the alarm system, and they sent a car or somebody to pass by the building, and they didn't see anything, so they left. But I have a question, and I have to turn this over to the expert on fire sciences and departmental procedure. How does a fire alarm system without electricity run?
It doesn't. Well, I mean, you know, there are a few questions, and obviously I wasn't at the meeting, and in a way I'm glad I wasn't, because then it would have ended up a question and answer thing dominated by me, and somebody would have said, hey, you know, what is he doing there? You know, and all I can comment is on the normal SOPs and stuff. The fact is that, you know, number one, fire alarm systems, you need power to have them. So how that system got online, I don't know. You know, the fact is, if there's no electricity, there's, you know, the smoke detectors obviously would not have, even if they were battery backup units, they have to be hardwired. They wouldn't have any power because there'd been no, according to what we've been told, there had been no electricity in that building for almost 2 years. So what was going to activate the fire alarm system is beyond me. How it was online without electricity is beyond me. So that's the first question. And I'm not sure if, you know, maybe the 22 window gate issue again, we may never get an answer. How a trouble light came in is another issue. And all I can tell you is the procedure that we used when I was on the job. A trouble light comes in, it indicates a trouble. Now, a trouble means there's an issue with the fire alarm system. It may be a ground fault, it may be an electrical, you know, minor electric, maybe something else. But the SOP was always to send an engine company or a fire company to not just drive by the building. They actually have to physically get out and look into the building and examine the, you know, the building to see if there's anything inside the building showing. You know, you know, that's a responsibility to once that comes in, because a trouble light indicates a problem with the system, and we don't want any system that's protected by a fire alarm system to have any kind of problem. We want it to be functioning perfectly. The other factor is that if they got a trouble light and it was a fire, they should have had a fire light, because those systems are all made where the fire code is a priority code. It'll override a trouble light. That's the reason that we don't we don't require fire watches when there's a trouble light showing. We check the building, we inform the people who own the building to repair the trouble, to get their thing in, but but the fact is that the premises, that system is in fact active because you are getting a trouble light. It's going from the building that's protected through the line to fire alarm, and they are getting a trouble light. So therefore, the integrity of the system is there. And a fire, obviously, will override that. So why a fire light didn't come in, and I know you said that somebody said it was tampered with, but if it was tampered with, the only way to eliminate a light is to interrupt the circuit and shut the system off. Now, if that happens, fire alarm is going to flag it because the system's going to be, they're going to show that the system is no longer active, and there is an SOP for that. If a system goes offline, we have to check why it went offline, especially a system that had been in trouble. Because the reason is, if it was in trouble and then it completely goes offline, for all we know, there could have been a fire that then destroyed the wiring and shut the entire system down, and now there's no longer a trouble or a fire light. So obviously, when that system went offline, somebody should have been informed. I was called literally hundreds of times in the middle of the night to tell me that there's a box that went offline that had previously been in trouble, or that a box had gone offline. As a matter of fact, there is a procedure in place now where all businesses that are protected by fire alarms have to call fire alarm whenever they take a box offline. If they're working on an alarm system, if the alarm system is going to be not in service for any length of time, they actually have to physically call fire alarm, give the name and the title of the individual and the reason why they're taking the box offline, and that time is logged in a logbook, and then when they complete the system work, they have to call back and put the box back online. This is to eliminate, if they're working on a fire alarm box and the alarm keeps coming in and out, we're not going to have dispatch sending fire apparatus like we're getting an actual alarm. They realize that the alarm's being worked on. There's a log, and the boxes that are offline are supposed to be logged. So there were a lot of questions about what this is, but I get back to the bottom line is, why are we making, we've had numerous fires. Is it because it's a political season? There are a lot of unanswered questions, and as I said, I'm not gonna, I can't answer those questions. All I can tell you is that the answers that were given, really do not coincide with what what happens. I mean, you're not going to tell me that you got a trouble and then it was tampered with and you never got a fire light. Well, the only way you can eliminate that trouble light is to eliminate the system, because that trouble light, if in fact they had a trouble light, and how they got the trouble light is another mystery, but if that trouble light was going across into fire alarm, it meant the integrity of the system was there.
Right.
What are we getting, police calls? Are they going to arrest us or what? I don't know. I hear it sounds like a
Somebody
walking.
here for you, Chip.
Yeah, they're coming to take me away. Well, but as I said, and I'm not speaking from theory. I was a chief for 25 years. I had hundreds and hundreds of these calls. I also had instances where we went to a building responding to a fire alarm, and we got there, and the maintenance man's out in front saying, "Oh, what are you guys doing here? We're working on a system." And then I had to tell him, "Well, you realize, the procedure. Did you call? Oh, I thought Joe at the office was going to call. He didn't call." But no, the reality is there is a logical system in place, and there are also logical protocols. It only makes sense that a fire alarm system would have a fire light as its maximum priority signal, and that system would be designed to, if there's a trouble, to override a trouble and send the fire light in. And if that didn't happen, well, the fire alarm system or somebody is got to be held accountable, and because that's not the way it works. And the thing is that there are a lot of questions, but the other question is, we had a fire. So what's the big deal? The big deal is more, I think, what we're going to do with the building, and I think this is kind of a diversionary tactic. We're going to explain what happened at every fire. Well, you know, if we explain what happened at, you know, if we should be doing this for every single fire.
Right.
Because in reality, this is not, you know, it's not a Kerr Mill, it's not an Arlen's, it's not a Notre Dame. It was a building fire, and it was a building that didn't have a lot of exposures, and you know, it's kind of like a routine fire. I mean, in to firefighters, I mean, that was a fairly, you know, it was a larger building, but the fact is it's kind of set back on a hill, it's kind of isolated, you don't have any major exposures. It wasn't a big deal as far as the fire was concerned. Now, why the building, well, didn't have a fire alarm, but now it did have a fire alarm. It's kind of like the 22 windows. I don't know if we'll ever get answers, but the fact is, all I'm telling you is the way it's supposed to work and the way it did work for the 25 years that I was a chief on the job. Nobody had, you know, nobody took fire boxes offline without us knowing they got taken offline. No trouble lights came in that didn't get investigated, and no fire alarm system had a system that a fire wouldn't override a trouble.
CJ,
Yeah.
and yesterday I got a call. Somebody mentioned to me that the first call got into the police department at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the dispatcher then released that call. You think any possibility of that happening?
Well, the thing is that calls to dispatch to the police department or fire department, standard practice is to record those calls. Now, we can make a request under the Freedom of Information Act to review those calls. I would find it hard to believe that any dispatcher, either in police or fire, would withhold a report of a fire or a call. So I think that might be a little exaggerated, but I think that it's something that we need to look into. And I mean, Chip, have you ever heard of a call to dispatch ever being withheld?
Well, I'm engaging my analytical investigative skills here that I have to use so often. But you know, that 1 o'clock kind of coincides with what the fire department representative said the trouble light came in at.
Right.
So I would say, and like I said, I'm not saying this is fact. I'm just giving you a plausible scenario. As you said, I don't think that a trouble would be ignored or a call. I don't think it was a physical call. I think probably what we're talking about is the trouble light. Now, how that trouble light came in is another issue.
Right.
But let's say, for the sake of argument, that trouble light came in at 1 o'clock. Well, actually, something was done, because they did say they sent someone to investigate, whether they did a thorough investigation or a drive-by. But so apparently they got a trouble light at what probably happened is they got a trouble light at 1 o'clock. They acknowledged the trouble light. They notified someone, and that someone, which is normally the chief on duty, would tell them to send a piece of apparatus to check, and that would be, you know, if it was checked out and found to be okay, well, it was okay. The premises was all right. But as I said, normally the procedure was to physically get out of the vehicles and check the building. If somebody was in a building, they would have found that out. The other problem is, hopefully, and we did have some major issues, and I thought those issues had been resolved when fire alarm left the fire department and went over to the combined police and fire, that we had a lot of dispatchers that were sending police cars to fire investigation calls, and then a police officer would turn around and say, I don't see anything, and that would be the end of it. But that's a violation of the law, because any kind of thing that's got to do with the fire department is supposed to be reported to the fire department. And we had a couple of instances early in this procedure where we actually had a couple of arson fires that weren't reported to the fire department, and they have to be reported by law within 24 hours, because a police officer went by and said, oh, I don't see anything. Or, you know, don't worry, the fire's out, you don't have to send the fire department. Well, you do have to notify the fire department, and it's our call. So, you know, there are a lot of questions on this procedurally, but those things happen. You might have a new dispatcher, you might have another, you know, there's issues here, but like I said, there's a lot of questions procedurally, and maybe that's not a bad thing. If a procedure wasn't followed, they have to find out who didn't follow and correct it. But to me, there's a lot of talk about everything except the real issue, about what's going to happen to this building. We can't change the fact that we had a fire. We can't change the fact that that building now is damaged. And the reality is, the major issue here is not about the fire. We had the fire was put out. If there was a procedural glitch, well, we have to determine that.
Correct.
But the reality is, what are we going to do with the building? And, you know, we're talking here theoretically. You know, I don't want to, I'm not pointing fingers at it, because things happen. We had a situation years ago where a child unfortunately died at a fire, you know, and one of the, of course, the residents, you know, the fire was a pretty bad fire, the tenement house fire, and a young child died. And then it was released to the media that the fire department didn't respond for like 10 minutes to the fire call. And that was not true. What happened was, people assumed that the fire department was called, and it wasn't. Actually, we found out when we went back and looked at the records that it was a fire department medical rescue that called the fire in. They saw the smoke and called it in. And then 30 seconds or so after they called it in,
Everyone else did.
somebody else called.
Yep.
And when we looked at the record, from the time of the receipt of the alarm to the time of the first apparatus being on the scene was like 3 minutes.
Which meets the standards.
Which is well within the standard.
Right.
But the fact is that, you know, nobody is contesting the fact that that fire may have been burning for longer. But
Correct.
the problem is, everybody thought somebody else called, and it wasn't the fire. You know, like, you know, we're not, you know, we don't have crystal balls. You don't sit in a fire station and these visions erupt that there's a fire somewhere. You have to be called. And and there are many cases where everybody else thinks somebody else called, and then they call us and they go, you know, where the hell have you been? Well, you know,
Nobody told us.
we got the call like 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the thing, and you know, firefighters and police officers always have to deal with this, because in an emergency, 10 seconds seems like a half an hour.
Yep.
So those people are watching an emergency incident, and the time is not a long duration, but to them it seems like forever. You know, I mean, you know, we can go on forever. I mean, there was an instance one time where, you know, I almost got into a fist fight at an alarm. The guy attacked me when I got out of the chief's car, yelling, "Where the hell have you been?"
Right.
And it had been like 3 minutes since we got the alarm. So, I mean, these are all things, but to me, like I said, it's a peripheral issue. You know, procedurally, okay, maybe we should start checking a little bit deeper and seeing if there was any, you know, if it was in fact just, you know, and if in fact if they sent somebody and they investigated the property, everything's fine. But why are we getting away from the fact that Carlos wants to save the building, and the city wants to bulldoze it, and some other guy wants to bulldoze it, and that's the real issue here. Is this a diversionary tactic, Carlos? I'm going to ask you a question.
I don't know. I can see that the things are moving way too fast. We have a building that, you know, a wall is falling off the building, and the building's still standing probably for another 10 years. And we have a fire on a building that the four walls are intact, and that's the preservation part of that building. And in 2 days, they're having a motion everywhere to knock it down. So right there, I say, you know, let's at least give it a chance to save it.
But Carlos, you know, the CPA is an actual failure, massive failure. They can't do anything right. So community preservation only means, is your friend in the North End needs some money to fix his roof?
At this point, I'm have more faith on the Preservation Society.
Well, I hope so. But you know, one of the issues which is kind of getting buried under this too, and I think this is another reason why we're doing all these diversionary tactics, on September 1st at 6 p.m. at the City Council chamber, the Committee on Environment and Health is going to take off the table since 2013 an expansion of the landfill. An expansion of the landfill into the area known as the easterly slope of Mount Trashmore. And it's going to produce 625,000 cubic yards of space to dump solid waste in. Based upon the formulas that we did post in a recent story on South Coast Media, that will produce somewhere between 130 and 163 days of life for the new landfill expansion. Now, are we going to get host fees for that? Oh, and are the purple bag fees going to go away? How about the sanitation fee? Or are we just going to grab up those host fees and move it forward? The other thing that's coming up is a request to approve the variance, because currently state law requires that the trash be 100 feet away from the property. They want it 40. That's like me putting a dumpster underneath your bedroom window. Isn't that nice?
But when, see, I think the real thing that the people really need to hear, CJ, is when this thing all began, when this process began. Because remember, former Mayor Flanagan complained that the loss of the host fees was one of the reasons that we had that $16 million deficit. But the fact is that he knew that that host fee loss was going to be temporary if in fact this expansion occurred, and they knew that this plan was in the works. As a matter of fact, what was the date of the original?
The original request for the expansion was 2008.
Wow. What
Now,
a coincidence.
Wait, it gets even better. It gets even better. So in 2008, they put this plan forward, and they tried to get it through. It went back in 2009, came back in 2010, came back in 2011, came back in 2013. And in 2013, the committee, which currently consists of Mike Mioza, who also serves on the trash committee, who also served on the trash committee at the time of this tabling, tabled this matter. Linda Pereira serves on the trash committee, in other words, the environmental committee, and so does City Councilor Jaisal Correa. They tabled this. Now all of a sudden, election year, remember, budget shortfall, we're going to bring this out of the woodwork. Nobody knew about it until we have a budgetary shortfall that we know about. They're not admitting to, but we know about it. And amazingly, Sam Sutter pulls it out of the clouds. But I think the bigger question is, if Will Flanagan knew that this expansion was available, but again, remember, it's only 130 to 160 days, and he used this as a primary reason to create the purple bags, who lied to who? Will we ever have an answer?
Well, and the other thing we're never going to have is, well, number one, the council, the city council, you know, they tabled this numerous times. Why didn't someone, when we discussed the loss of the host fees and the purple bags, say, well, isn't there something in the process, in the works, to continue the landfill for a while? We have a little bit of time to deal with this. But no, what did we have an excuse to do? Take more money from the people. And guess what? If this landfill is expanded and we get host fees, you think they'll take some of the tax, give us some of our tax dollars back? Not a chance.
Not a chance, baby.
Not a chance. They love taking your money. There's never, ever been a tax raise that ever went away. There's never, ever been a tax increase that was temporary. You know, there's never been a temporary fee. There's never been a temporary tax. It's always permanent. So, you know, they use that for the purple bags. They use that to increase 2.5. They use that as one of the reasons. And again, not only did we know that landfill was going to close, but we also knew that it really wasn't going to close right away, and we had some time. And had that been handled and that processed, there may have been no break in the host fees. But no, again, incompetence and just, it's just ridiculous.
Create the havoc.
When you think that half of the problems that we have in this city, well, more than half. Jesus, I'm giving them way too much credit. Half. Like 85% of the trouble in this city.
They're coming for you, Chip.
I know. 85% of the problems we have in this city, we create.
Yes,
Think
we
about
do.
it.
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about every reason that Flanagan gave for the deficit, every single reason we knew about. We knew that the Safer grant was going to go away. We knew that the landfill didn't have to close. We also, and everything that was in there. So, listen, it's like the Coughlin School. Carlos, they figure they do this really quickly, and they bulldoze it, and now it's a parking lot, and then when they find out that people want to preserve this building, they'll go, oh, well, it's not there anymore.
You know, it's really great.
So let's let the guy build some track houses on here, and let's move some more
I
Section
just
8
have to
people
say,
in.
from the last meeting we had Wednesday night, we have the page, Friends of Coughlin School, got 75, last time that I checked yesterday, got 75 new friends.
Yeah, well,
just on that page.
People are upset because, you know, when we look at this and we look at this headache known as the council, all right, the first thing they're going to do, and you and I have been through, and Chip, you've had 25 years of negotiating contracts for the city, for the fire department. As soon as there's a problem, fire is going to get cut. But if we get this fee for sanitation, we won't cut fire. How does a sanitation fee, which is supposed to go to sanitation only, not cut fire? Oh, well, that's because they moved that money supposedly over to fire. If you look at the budget, it never gets moved over to fire. It gets moved somewhere else. Here's another thing that a lot of you didn't know, and we don't have a lot of time left, but the 153 men fire complement was agreed to by the union with Mayor Will Flanagan. And they came out saying, oh, we can't do that, but that was an agreement that was in place, just like the 173. These are not things that we weren't aware of. These are things that you, the public, wasn't aware of. And you keep saying, we got to save fire because, you know, it's necessary. Yeah, we do. It's necessary for us to fund that totally out of city tax dollars, not safer grants. It's necessary for us to fund the police department the same way.
You got to remember one thing. This is what happens. This is why we want you to listen, educate yourself, ask questions. The DCM is supposed to be an enterprise fund.
Yes.
And an enterprise fund is self-funding.
Correct.
And it never has been self-funding by admission of our council and our mayor. It has been subsidized since it became an enterprise fund. You know what that means? The government is not doing its job. The director of the DCM should have been called in and said, you have an enterprise fund. You are not funding yourself. It's your obligation as the department head to figure out a way to fund yourself.
Right.
And that's the key. It's not about we're going to give money, we're going to take money from the fire department and give it to you, and then we're going to charge more taxes to give the fire department back their own money. Because we used the 14 jobs we eliminated in 2009 or something like that and to give it to DCM. Well, that's why, look, if we're not going to have an enterprise fund, the hell with it. Throw them all out. Get rid of them. But if you're going to say that these departments have to fund themselves, it's up to the department head to figure out a way to fund it. And if he doesn't, he should be held accountable. Not the fire department, not the police department, not the public nurses. You know, the government tries to mix and match. They meld everything in, and it's a scare tactic. It's always going to eliminate things that are going to hurt you. Crime or fire. And you know something? As far as I'm concerned, it's reprehensible. That's why I tell you to stay angry, get angry, stay angry. Let's get out to the polls in September, and I'm very disappointed in the candidates. This has been one of the weakest primary seasons I've ever seen. Seems like nobody's campaigning. Stop giving out hot dogs and let's talk about it. Let's talk about issues.
Hey, it's another great show. Sorry we got so hung up on the fire issue, and I broke my #1 rule. I didn't silence my phone. But thanks for watching. You have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
Don't let them bulldoze Coughlin.
This is fun.